Welcome, Algebra 1, to your last video of the year. So I feel like that's exciting news. I feel like it's kind of sad news, but it is exciting. We're almost done. So obviously we are doing the Chapter 9 study guide today. So that's our last section. And let's get to it. So 1 through 6 is basically matching kind of what's being set up here to one of the graphs down below, A, B, C, or D. And so let's just start. It says the axis of symmetry is the y-axis. So if you guys remember, the axis of symmetry is the line that cuts the parabola directly in half. And if it's the y-axis, the axis of symmetry is this line. And actually, if you notice, the y-axis cuts that parabola directly in half. And not to mention, it cuts right through the vertex, which we know the axis of symmetry and the vertex are like the line cuts through always the vertex. So in this case, the answer is A. Okay, so the quadratic has no solutions. So no solutions when we have a graph that has no solutions. Remember, other words for solutions are zeros, roots, and the one that's going to help us the most here is x-intercepts. So basically it's saying it has no x-intercepts. So which one of our graphs has no x-intercepts? Or if I would rephrase that, which one of these has a graph that never crosses the x-axis? And again, it's A. So remember, no solutions. All that's saying is there are no x-intercepts, so the graph will not touch the x-axis. Because remember, solutions, x-intercepts, all of those are synonyms. Okay, the quadratic has a discriminant equal to 0. This is kind of like bringing it all together, right? So in the last video, one of the last videos last week, we talked about the discriminant and how many solutions, if the discriminant equals something, how many solutions there will be. So if the discriminant is positive, there are 2 solutions. If the discriminant is negative, there are no solutions. And if the discriminant is equal to 0, that means that there's 1 solution. So if the discriminant equals 0, that tells me there will be 1 solution, or we know that means there's going to be 1 x-intercept. Okay. So we look to see which one of these has only 1 point where it crosses the x-axis. Well, A, it never crosses the x-axis. B, it crosses it 1, 2 spots. C, it crosses it 1, 2 spots. But D, it only crosses it in 1 spot. So D is our answer for 3. Okay, so then the quadratic has a vertex at -2, -3. So all we have to do is see where that point is. So if the vertex is at -2, -3, let's see. So this vertex is at about 0, 1. This vertex is at -2, -3. And that's what we wanted. Oops, running out of ink here. So my answer for 4 is going to be B. Okay, so for 5, the A value of a quadratic is negative. So remember the A value of the quadratic, if it's negative, that tells me it's opening downwards. And if it's positive, that tells me it opens upwards. So if it's negative, that tells me that the parabola is opening downwards. And so which one of these has a parabola that's opening downwards? And it's C. Okay, last one, the quadratic has a negative discriminant. Now, remember, we talked about discriminants up here. When we have a positive, there's 2. When it's 0, it was 1. And so a negative discriminant means there are no solutions, which we actually have already talked about. It's the same as, it's basically asking the same as 2. So negative discriminant means no x-intercepts. And so 6 is, like I said, 6 is asking the same thing as 2. So 6 is A also. And that is it for our first page. Okay, so let's pick up on number 7. 7, 8, 9, and 10 are all for this question. Using this quadratic, y equals 2x squared minus 2. So our first question asked us to solve for the vertex. So what I like to do is just start by labeling A, B, and C. So A here is 2. It's always the number that's attached to the x squared. So A is 2. B is always the one that's attached to the x value. Now, if you notice in this, there is no x value. So what that means is B is actually equal to 0. And then C is my constant. C is the number that doesn't have a variable at all attached to it. So C is negative 2. Okay, so to solve for our vertex, remember our formula is opposite of B over 2A to find our H value. So let's start there. So H is equal to the opposite of 0 divided by 2A, so 2 times 2. Well, if you notice what happens, 0 over 4, okay. Well, anything when 0's on top is always going to simplify to be 0. So our H value is going to be 0. Okay, so then to find our K value, we use the H value and plug it back in for X to solve for Y. So K is going to be equal to 2 times 0 squared minus 2. First, remember we do our exponent, so 0 squared is just 0. 2 times 0 is 0, and 0 minus 2 gets me a K value of negative 2. So we have our ordered pair. Our ordered pair, remember, is H comma K. So my vertex is 0 comma negative 2. And that is it. Okay, so for 8, it says solve for the axis of symmetry. Remember the axis of symmetry, if we have the H value of our vertex, we have the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is just x equals 0. So remember, the axis of symmetry is just the x is equal to the H value of the vertex. So it has to be that x equals because it's the equation of a vertical line. So if you miss that x equals part, you're missing a chunk of this answer, and it's not going to be correct. So you've got to put that x equals for it to be 100% correct. Okay, so will the quadratic have a maximum or minimum? And that's basically asking what direction is the parabola opening. If it's opening upwards, so if the parabola is opening upwards like this, the vertex is going to be the lowest point, so it's going to be a minimum. If it's opening downwards, the vertex is going to be the highest point, so it's a maximum. So to determine what direction it's opening, look at our A value. If A is equal to 2 here, then that tells me that the parabola is going to be opening upwards, and that tells me that I'm going to have a minimum. So again, let's make note of that. When A is positive, the parabola will open upwards. And when it opens upwards, we have a quadratic that looks like that, and the vertex will be the minimum. Okay, so number 10 then asks to solve for the solutions of the quadratic using square roots. Remember, solutions is when y is equal to 0. So we set y equal to 0 and solve for x. Because it's the same as solving for our x-intercepts. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take our equation 2x squared minus 2. We're going to set it equal to 0 because we're going to plug in 0 for y. And now we're going to solve using square roots. So I gave you the hint there of what method to use. So when you're using square roots, remember you want to isolate. That means you want to isolate the x squared. So what that means is I want to get x squared all by itself. So I'm going to first add 2 to both sides. And I have 2x squared equals 2. I still need to get this x squared by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And then I get x squared equals 1. Now, to get x, I need to, once I isolate the x squared, then solve for x. To solve for x, I take the square root of both sides. To undo that square, I'm going to square root both sides. And then the square root of 1, remember the square root of any number is always that plus or minus. So x equals plus or minus, and the square root of 1 is just 1. So you can either write it as x equals plus or minus 1. You could write it as the ordered pairs, 1, 0, negative 1, 0. However you feel more comfortable writing it is totally fine. Okay, so let's move on to the next kind of section, and then we'll kind of pause the video there and pick it up, with a new video. So 11 through 14 is all related to x squared plus 8x plus 12. So the first thing, it's really similar. It's just like 7 through 10. We're just looking at a new quadratic. So the first thing I'm going to do is label A, B, and C. So A here is 1. There is no number attached to x squared, so we can always assume there's a 1 there. B here is attached to the x, so B is 8. And C is the constant, is not attached to any variable, is 12. Okay, so it says solve for the vertex, so we use our formula, opposite of B over 2A. So H is equal to the opposite of 8 divided by 2 times A, so 2 times 1. And so that gets me -8/2. So -8 divided by 2 gets me an h value of -4. Okay, so then to get our k value, we just plug it in. So we plug in -4 in for x. So k equals -4 squared plus 8 times -4 plus 12. So we first want to do our exponents. -4 times -4 is a positive 16. I multiply, so 8 times -4 is -32. And then let's do that in our calculator. 16 minus 32 plus 12 gets me -4 also. So my vertex, h comma k, -4, -4. So to solve for the axis of symmetry, again, we just look at the x value of our vertex. Our x value of our vertex is -4. So our axis of symmetry, x equals -4. Okay, so will the quadratic have a maximum or a minimum? So remember, we need to look at our a value. Our a value here is 1. So because our a value is 1, that tells me, again, that the parabola is going to open upwards. So it's just like number 9. So that tells me that the vertex is going to be a minimum. Okay, last one is going to be solve the quadratic, or solve for the solutions of the quadratic by factoring. So again, same as 10, to find the solutions, we set y equal to 0 and solve for x. So that means we're going to take x squared plus 8x plus 12 and set it equal to 0. Now it says solve by factoring, so that means we're going to set up our x, a times c, so 1 times 12 is 12, and then b goes in the bottom. So we're thinking, what two numbers multiply together to get me 12 and add to get me 8? And if you're thinking 6 and 2, you would be correct. We can use the shortcut here because a is equal to 1, so I can just go straight to x plus 6 times x plus 2. And then I can set each factor equal to 0. X plus 6 equals 0 and x plus 2 equals 0, and solve. So subtract 6 from both sides. I get x equals -6. Subtract 2 from both sides, and I get x equals -2. So I get my two solutions, -6 and -2. So if I were to graph this, that is where my graph would cross the x-axis. So like if we were to pull up Desmos and look at that graph, we can also see that vertex. So if I were to graph that, x squared plus 8x plus 12. If we look here, first, my vertex is at -4, -4, what we found. And then my solutions, -6, -2, are what we found too. The parabola opens upwards. The vertex is the lowest point, so it's a minimum. So kind of putting it all together there. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video here, and then we'll pick up with the next couple of problems on the next video. So go take a break, do what you need to do, and then come back, and we'll start the next couple set of problems. Okay, I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye, guys.